You ever feel like you're just caught in the middle of a dozen different crises all at once? Military standoffs here, stock markets going crazy over there. It's a lot. But today, we're going to untangle this whole messy web together. Okay, so here's a question for you. What in the world does a US warship, a Pakistani jet, and a tiny Silicon Valley microchip have in common? I mean, they sound totally random, right? But what if they're not? What if they're all connected? Because they are. They're all moves on a new kind of global chessboard. A game where the fighting isn't just happening on land or sea anymore. It's happening online, it's happening in our financial markets, all at the exact same time.
All right, so let's start with the stuff that's easy to see, the moves grabbing the headlines. We're talking about those classic geopolitical hotspots that are really heating up, from this really tense dance in the Middle East all the way to straight-up war in South Asia.
And this really breaks it down perfectly. You've got two very different kinds of conflict playing out. Over on the left, with the US and Iran, it's something called coercive diplomacy. Think of it like a high-stakes staring contest, moving military pieces around, making threats, all to get the other side to back down without actually fighting. But then you look to the right with Pakistan and Afghanistan, that's not a staring contest anymore. That has boiled over into actual open war. So this is what that coercive diplomacy looks like in the real world. The US moves an entire carrier group. That's not just for show, it's a massive military signal. Then, they tell non-essential staff to leave the embassy in Jerusalem. It's a quieter move, but believe me, it's serious. So even though they're still talking, the message couldn't be clearer. The military option is absolutely on the table. And the goal? To stop Iran from getting this close to having a nuclear weapon.
Okay, now let's hop over to South Asia, because this is a whole different ballgame. Take a look at this quote. This isn't some vague threat. This is a flat-out declaration of war. After a bunch of attacks back and forth across the border, Pakistan's defense minister just posts this online. And just like that, a conflict that had been simmering for ages is now an official declared war between two countries.
And the results? I mean, the immediate result? Pakistan's main stock index just nosedived. We're talking a drop of over 3,000 points. A single post online, and bam, you've got a massive economic crisis on your hands. Just let that sink in for a second. But here's the thing. This global chessboard, it's not just about tanks and jets anymore. Now we're going to pivot to a totally different front line, one you can't even see. This is where the real fight for dominance is happening, and it's being fought with code, with algorithms. Yeah, welcome to the AI battlefield. Now, before we get any deeper, we've got to get our heads around this concept. This isn't your average hacking we're talking about. Nope. AI-driven cyber attacks are basically autonomous weapons. They can, on their own, hunt for weak spots in an enemy's most critical systems. We're talking power grids, communication networks, you name it. And they do it all without a human having to press a button. And this is exactly what the Pentagon is focused on right now. They want to build AI that can essentially paralyze another country, shut down their ability to even function, all without firing a single shot. Think about that. It's a way to win the war before it even starts. This is a game changer, a fundamental shift in how warfare is even conceived. But this whole thing creates a massive problem. Because the companies actually building this insane technology, companies like Anthropic, they're starting to push back hard. The Pentagon is telling them, hey, we need you to loosen up those safety rules for military use. And Anthropic is saying, no way. They're talking about corporate responsibility and their conscience. And this clash, this tension between national security and the private tech companies that literally own the AI, this is maybe one of the biggest, most important conflicts of our era. Okay, so we've got the physical battlefields, and we've got the invisible digital war. So now, let's connect the dots. Let's see how all these power plays, both geopolitical and technological, are creating these huge shockwaves that ripple through the entire global economy. We're talking about stuff that affects everything from what you pay at the pump to the value of your own investments. Check this out. The second things get tense between the US and Iran, this is what happens on the markets. Boom. Oil prices jump, sometimes by as much as 4%, all because traders are worried about supply getting cut off. And at the same time, the price of gold shoots up. Why? Because when investors get scared, they run to what they think of as a safe haven. This isn't some guess. It's a direct, you can literally measure it reaction to risk. And if you think that's wild, the tech world is even crazier. Meta and Google announce a huge deal to make their own AI chips. And just like that, $250 billion gets erased from Nvidia's value. In a single day, it's just staggering. And it all happened because that one announcement hinted that the crown for who's king of AI hardware might be up for grabs. All right, so let's recap. We got real-world conflicts, a full-blown digital arms race, and markets that are just all over the place. So the big question is, how do you even begin to navigate this world as an investor? Well, let's try and break it down. Let's look at the winners and the losers in this brand new age of risk. And we're going to look at this in 3 stages. First, the short term, like the immediate gut reaction. Then the medium term, where things start to settle into a kind of new normal. And finally, the long term, where we'll see those really deep fundamental changes start to take shape. So in the short term, when a crisis really hits, money tends to move in very predictable ways. It just floods into those safe assets we talked about, like oil and gold, and of course into defense and cybersecurity companies. At the same time, money flees anything that's in the direct line of fire, like we saw with Pakistani stocks, and it really hammers industries like travel and tourism. Now, moving into that medium term, as these tensions just become part of our daily reality, the focus starts to shift a bit. Yeah, the national security stuff, defense, cybersecurity, they're still going to do well. But companies that really depend on people feeling confident and spending money, they're going to start to feel the squeeze. And then the long-term view. Looking out a few years, you can really start to see the big structural winners take shape. And we're talking about the industries that are basically going to be the backbone of this new world. Things like super advanced cybersecurity, the entire AI ecosystem, and all the digital infrastructure, the cloud, the data centers that holds it all together. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? I think it comes down to this. It doesn't matter if you're running a country or just managing your own money. The old playbook is out the window. We're in a world now where a small border fight can crash a stock market, and a single business deal can totally change the balance of global power. In a world like that, the most valuable thing you can have is resilience. And that really leaves us with one last thing to chew on. You know, when everything, politics, technology, finance, is all this tangled up and this unpredictable, is building resilience maybe the only true asset left? The only investment that really, truly matters?